I honestly am still baffled to this day how she could take the father of her kids away from them like that. He was way too nice of a human being. He would literally never harm a soul.
He loved those kids more than anything in the world. And she took that away. And now those kids have no parents.
Matthew Gerald Mizner was born on August 20th, 1984, to Raymond and Jeanne, and was raised in Tucson, Arizona, alongside his 5 siblings. Those who knew him described him as a quiet and introverted individual, yet beneath his reserved nature lay a compassionate and dependable person. His interest in wrestling helped him break out of his shell, and after high school he attended Pima Community College, primarily to continue wrestling rather than pursue academic interests. At 26, Matthew met Georgina Mendoza, a 25-year-old woman who embodied his opposite. Georgina exuded confidence and outgoingness, hailing from a background vastly different from Matthew's nurturing upbringing. While both shared Tucson as their hometown, Georgina's early life was marked by turmoil, having witnessed her mother suffer abuse at the hands of her father, leading to their separation when Georgina was just 2 years old. Her father later faced incarceration, and her mother remarried, forging a distinct contrast between Georgina's and Matthew's formative experiences. Georgina's stepfather brought stability and kindness into her life, a welcome change from the turmoil she had endured. However, as she approached her senior year of high school, Georgina's life began to unravel. She started experimenting with drugs, and what began as a tentative foray quickly escalated into a 4-year struggle with heavy substance abuse. Her academic pursuits and hobbies, including soccer, drumming, and choir, fell by the wayside as she dropped out of school. It wasn't until Georgina had a moment of clarity, recognizing the devastating impact her choices were having, that she sought help and entered rehab. At 24, she emerged from rehab determined to rebuild her life. It was then that she met Matthew, the supportive partner she needed. Their romance blossomed quickly, and by 2013 they were married. Soon, Georgina was pregnant, and the couple began making plans for their future family. Matthew, too, faced a new reality, providing for a family. He took on a job at the Morenci copper mine, located 3 hours north of Tucson, necessitating a move to Safford, Arizona. With their unborn child, the trio relocated, packing up their lives and settling 40 minutes from Matthew's new workplace, ready to start anew. The decision to relocate to Safford, Arizona was a monumental sacrifice for the couple, as they were leaving behind the only life they had ever known in Tucson. The mere 3-hour distance belied the magnitude of the change, as they were forced to uproot their entire existence, leaving behind family, friends, and everything familiar. This drastic shift would necessitate a significant adjustment, as they would no longer be able to maintain regular contact with their loved ones. In 2014, Georgina gave birth to their first child, a premature son who required an extended hospital stay, but ultimately recovered. Shortly thereafter, Georgina became pregnant again, and in 2015 she welcomed their second child, a daughter. 2 years later, in 2017, Georgina became pregnant with their third child, but this pregnancy was marked by turmoil. The household was chaotic, with Matthew and Georgina struggling to cope with exhaustion and increased arguing. Matthew's demanding work schedule, necessitated by their growing family's needs, further exacerbated the tension. As Georgina navigated her third pregnancy, she was running on empty, juggling the demands of her job, caring for their 2 young children, and managing the physical toll of pregnancy. The cumulative strain took a devastating toll on both Georgina and Matthew, ultimately leading to their decision to file for divorce after 6 years together. The divorce papers were filed, and they separated, with Georgina giving birth to their third child in December 2017. Despite the challenges, their split was relatively amicable, with the court granting shared custody, 50-50. Georgina moved back to Tucson, seeking support from her parents, while Matthew remained in Safford, committed to his job at the mines and determined to maintain a stable environment for their children. Matthew prioritized cooperation, flexibility, and a smooth transition, striving to avoid conflict. In contrast, Georgina struggled to accept their new arrangement, often inserting herself into Matthew's scheduled time with their children, attempting to exert control and undermine his parenting. As time passed, Matthew's life began to flourish. He started a new relationship with his co-worker, Nicole, after his divorce from Georgina was underway. Their relationship was a breath of fresh air, and those around him noticed a significant transformation. Matthew appeared healthier, happier, and more in love than ever before. The divorce seemed to be a blessing in disguise, as both parties moved on to new relationships. Georgina, too, found someone new, but despite her own progress, she couldn't shake off her discontent with the custody arrangement. She continued to create obstacles, making it challenging for Matthew to spend time with their children. In contrast, Matthew focused on maintaining peace and moving forward. He was determined to keep the peace and avoid conflict, even when Georgina tried to insert herself into his time with the kids. Matthew's relationship with Nicole brought out the best in him, and he was thrilled to have a second chance at love. He proposed to Nicole, and they got engaged in 2019, setting their wedding date for St. Patrick's Day in 2020. Matthew was ecstatic to start this new chapter in love, and everything seemed to be falling into place. However, tragedy struck on February 10, 2020, when a local fire chief driving along rural highway 191 in Arizona stumbled upon a black Chevrolet Tahoe that had been forced off the road near Horseshoe Curve. As he approached the vehicle to offer assistance, he was met with a grisly sight. The driver slumped over the passenger seat, unconscious and bleeding profusely. Closer inspection revealed the devastating truth. The driver was dead, with multiple bullet wounds to the head. The Clifton Police Department's investigators swiftly arrived at the scene, taking in the shattered glass and bullet holes riddling the car's side. Initially, they suspected a road rage incident, but Detective Eric Ellison's keen eye picked up on a crucial detail. The sheer number of bullet holes suggested a more sinister motive. This was no random act of violence. It was personal. As investigators scoured the car for clues, they discovered the victim's wallet containing an Arizona driver's license that identified the deceased as 35-year-old Matthew Mizner. The discovery sent shockwaves through the community as Matthew's loved ones struggled to come to terms with the senseless loss of his life just weeks before his wedding day. A medical examiner's report revealed that Matthew suffered 3 9mm gunshot wounds to the side of his head, but the absence of shell casings at the scene raised further questions about the road rage theory. A spontaneous attacker would unlikely have taken the time to collect the casings, suggesting a premeditated murder. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that Matthew was targeted, but he had no known enemies and was widely regarded as a kind and caring individual. Detectives cordoned off the area, seeking potential witnesses or evidence. Matthew's fiancée, Nicole, arrived unexpectedly, piquing the detectives' interest, as the media had not been notified, and it was unlikely that Matthew's family had been informed. The detectives were intrigued by Nicole's early arrival and her account, sparking a deeper exploration of her potential involvement in Matthew's tragic death. Nicole explained that she and Matthew worked at the same location and took the same route. She had seen a car resembling Matthew's on her way to work, but didn't stop, only to panic when he wasn't at work and return to the scene, finding the police. The detectives informed Nicole of the heartbreaking news. Matthew's death was a homicide, shot 3 times. Nicole was overcome with grief and disbelief. To rule her out as a suspect, the detectives collected evidence and questioned her about Matthew's life. Nicole described Matthew as a well-liked and affable person who had a harmonious relationship with his co-workers. However, his relationship with his ex-wife, Georgina, was tumultuous. 6 months prior, Georgina claimed to have cancer, and Matthew offered assistance, but she rebuffed him, especially regarding their children. The situation escalated when Georgina denied Matthew visitation rights. Nicole, frustrated by the situation, confronted Georgina, leading to a physical altercation when Georgina slapped her. This incident fueled further animosity. Georgina also filed a false report with Child Protective Services, accusing Matthew and Nicole of abuse. After investigating, Child Protective Services found no evidence and closed the case. Notably, Matthew filed for full custody of his children on February 5, 2020, just 5 days before his murder. This development raised suspicions about Georgina's motives, prompting detectives to investigate her further. As the investigation unfolded, the complex relationships and events surrounding Matthew's life became increasingly entangled, and detectives were determined to explore every lead in their pursuit of justice. Matthew's concerns about Georgina's mental stability and ability to care for their children prompted him to seek full custody. The custody hearing was scheduled for February 11, 2020, ironically, a day after his murder. Upon learning this information, detectives immediately considered Georgina a prime suspect. Around the same time, the Sapulpa Police Department received a call from a witness who had heard about the incident and wanted to provide information. The witness claimed to have driven past the scene shortly after Matthew's murder, initially thinking the car had simply blown a tire. However, they recalled seeing a white sedan make a suspicious U-turn at the scene before speeding away in the opposite direction, suggesting a potential getaway. Furthermore, another witness contacted the police, stating they had been driving behind Matthew's car on his way to work that morning, potentially providing valuable insight into the events leading up to the murder. These witnesses' accounts, combined with Georgina's motives, strengthened the investigation's focus on her as a suspect. The witness driving behind Matthew lost sight of him briefly, but then heard a faint popping sound, which they initially dismissed but later suspected might have been a gunshot. When they caught up, they saw Matthew's car off the road with a white sedan parked in front of it. The sedan made a U-turn and sped away, fleeing the scene. This was the second witness to report seeing a white sedan fleeing the area. Police sought to identify the owner of the white sedan and revisited Nicole to inquire if she or Matthew knew anyone with such a vehicle. Nicole recalled an incident 5 days prior when a mysterious man took photos of Matthew, his car, and license plate at Georgina's house. Matthew, who was on the phone with Nicole at the time, took a photo of the man's car and license plate at Nicole's suggestion. As detectives spoke with Nicole, she searched her phone for the photo Matthew had sent her, potentially providing a crucial lead in the investigation. Nicole located the photo, revealing a white sedan, which detectives promptly investigated. They traced the license plate to Eduardo Montano Jr. and his grandfather, Samuel, as the registered owners. Notably, Eduardo had 2 outstanding misdemeanor warrants. The sheriff collaborated with the Pima County Police to arrest Eduardo, who was taken into custody within hours for his existing warrants. At his residence, a white Cadillac sedan matching the witness descriptions was found in the driveway. While awaiting search warrants for Eduardo's house and car, detectives took him to the Pima County Sheriff's Office for questioning. Detectives asked Eduardo about his activities the previous night and that morning. Eduardo claimed he had visited a couple of friends' houses and then returned to his grandfather's house where he lived. He vehemently denied being anywhere near the scene of the crime. Detectives pressed further, inquiring about his presence at Georgina's house on February 5th and the nature of their relationship. Eduardo downplayed their connection, stating they were merely friends who had attempted to date but didn't work out. As the investigation continued, detectives sought to uncover any potential connections between Eduardo, Georgina, and Matthew's murder, exploring possible motives and alibis. When asked if he knew Matthew, Eduardo acknowledged knowing of him through Georgina, aware of their custody dispute, but never having spoken to Matthew directly. Detectives pointed out the photo-taking incident, and Eduardo repeated his claim of never speaking to Matthew. Detectives applied gentle pressure, pretending to know more than they did, prompting Eduardo to mention his grandfather's comment about the accident, implying potential involvement. Eduardo maintained his alibi, insisting he was with friends and then went home, denying any presence at the crash site. Despite limited evidence, detectives suspected Eduardo's involvement due to his car's presence at the crime scene and connection to Georgina. They continued investigating, seeking additional information. Next, detectives interviewed Georgina at her mother's house, observing her erratic emotions, rapidly shifting from happiness to tears to anger. Her demeanor seemed rehearsed, raising suspicions. The detectives aimed to uncover any potential connections between Georgina, Eduardo, and Matthew's murder, exploring motives and inconsistencies in their testimonies. Georgina explained her opposition to Matthew's custody request, citing disapproval of his fiancée, Nicole, and alleging that Matthew and Nicole were abusive. However, detectives noted that Child Protective Services had investigated and found no evidence of abuse, casting doubt on Georgina's claims. When questioned about her relationship with Eduardo, Georgina described them as a friend whom she had briefly tried dating. She confided in him about the alleged abuse and custody dispute, feeling comfortable due to his own experiences with abuse and his help with her children. Detectives suspected that Eduardo, feeling protective, might have taken matters into his own hands, but they believed Georgina was involved in the planning. To verify Eduardo's alibi, detectives visited his grandfather Samuel's house, inquiring about Eduardo's whereabouts on the night of the murder. Samuel stated that Eduardo left around 1 a.m. and returned between 8 and 8:30 a.m., coinciding with the 5 a.m. murder. This information solidified Eduardo as the prime suspect, but investigators still required physical evidence to make an arrest. They continued to build their case, seeking concrete proof to link Eduardo and potentially Georgina to the crime. Upon obtaining search warrants, detectives thoroughly searched Eduardo's residence, discovering a 9mm Ruger pistol in his bedroom that matched the medical examiner's findings. The gun had 4 rounds remaining, and investigators believed 14 bullets had been fired at Matthew. The pistol was sent for forensic testing, and an arrest warrant was executed for Eduardo. On February 13th, Eduardo was arrested and held on a $1 million bond, marking a significant breakthrough in the case within 72 hours of Matthew's murder. However, detectives still needed to establish a motive and suspected Georgina's involvement. They conducted a more aggressive follow-up interview with Georgina, but she became uncooperative, unable to recall when she last saw Eduardo. When asked about her potential involvement in Matthew's murder, Georgina terminated the interview and refused to continue. Detectives seized her phone for analysis and released her pending further evidence. As detectives expanded their investigation, speaking with individuals close to Georgina and Matthew, they uncovered additional shocking information. Georgina had fabricated her cancer diagnosis, sending fake photos to Matthew in an attempt to prevent him from seeing their children. This revelation further implicated Georgina in the case, suggesting a pattern of deception and manipulation. The discovery of Georgina's fabricated cancer diagnosis further solidified the theory that she orchestrated Matthew's murder, potentially manipulating Eduardo into committing the crime. On February 25th, detectives received the phone analysis results, revealing incriminating texts between Georgina and Eduardo. These texts placed Eduardo at Matthew's location, showed he had stalked Matthew before the murder and exposed their closer relationship. A damning text exchange included Eduardo requesting Nicole's address and Georgina's response with the address and Nicole's car description. This contradicted their claims of a casual friendship. Despite professing to have stopped dating, the texts revealed declarations of love after their supposed breakup. On February 9th, the eve of Matthew's murder, Georgina texted Eduardo about her upcoming custody battle, implying action was needed against Matthew. Eduardo expressed hesitation, but Georgina goaded him, linking his actions to proving his worth as a partner. Eduardo asked if he should notify her once it was done. Georgina chillingly replied that she preferred to learn about it through other means, allowing her to feign a reaction. 10 hours later, Matthew's body was discovered, and the texts provided compelling evidence of Georgina and Eduardo's premeditated involvement in the murder. The exchange implicated Georgina as the mastermind, using emotional manipulation to coerce Eduardo into committing the crime. Following the discovery of the incriminating texts, Georgina was arrested on February 26th for Matthew's murder. Meanwhile, forensic analysis confirmed Eduardo's gun as the murder weapon. Eduardo later accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and aggravated assault, and received a 33-year and 9-month prison sentence. Notably, Eduardo never implicated Georgina in the crime, attempting to take full responsibility. However, by accepting the plea deal, Eduardo implicitly admitted to conspiring with Georgina, as there would have been no motive for the murder without her involvement. In November 2020, Georgina also accepted a plea deal, pleading guilty to second-degree murder and conspiracy to commit aggravated assault, and received an identical sentence of 33 years and 9 months in prison. At Georgina's sentencing hearing on January 5, 2021, her attorney highlighted her mental health issues and difficult childhood, suggesting her instability should be considered. Georgina took the stand, tearfully begging for mercy while attempting to portray herself as a victim. Despite apologizing, she failed to take accountability, claiming ignorance of Eduardo's plan to kill Matthew. Matthew's family testified, describing Georgina as unremorseful and self-centered, only caring about her own desires. Matthew's father emotionally testified, describing the irreparable loss of his son. Eduardo submitted a letter reiterating his attempt to take full responsibility, exonerating Georgina. However, the judge ultimately sentenced Georgina to 33 years and 9 months in prison, acknowledging her culpability in Matthew's murder. The sentencing brought a measure of closure for Matthew's family, but the pain of their loss will persist.